Champions, look at this bounty we have received today. A brand new patch with 70 new cards and no idea where it even came from. The north, the south, across the sea from somewhere. Wacky lore. Just the craziest stuff we've ever seen, I think, in the game. Quite possibly some of the most unique effects and some of the weirdest archetypes. Yes, let's talk about Merchants of Ofir. So, real quick, this is going to be the start of my video here, just talking about it. Merchants of Ofir dropped today, December the 9th, with no fanfare at all. It just arrived. The season isn't even over yet, and we have a new set of cards. People are still trying pretty hard at my rank. I'm like, let's send Shoop on some adventures. And there's, the new Singleton card. So much to talk about. But the Merchants of Ofir are here. You can grab your card kegs. You can just grab your card kegs, crack them open today. Crack them open. You got it on your phone, and see what you get. I'm always looking for legendaries, so hey, let's see what we got here. Nothing to talk about except for Bloody Good Friends, which is the story of the year. But I want to talk about the big features of this expansion because there are many cycles, you could say. Lots of mechanics that are here for the first time. And I can tell you that the scenarios, after playing with it for a little bit, they felt pretty good. And I'll explain why I think that they're actually appropriately costed. I could be wrong. So let's talk first of all. Now, you'll notice I don't even have all the cards, right? I don't have all the cards. Yeah, faction kegs. You can get special borders and faction kegs and faction packs from the store. That's all new. The shop is just full of new stuff. There's a new leader skin for Anna that you can get in the thing that makes her look like she's from Ofir. And then there's a new leader skin for Philavandrel in the reward book. It makes it look like he's from Ofir. Just play and dress up. A little cosplay from two leaders. They probably just had the skeleton. The two things. I mean, it's an Anna skin, but you could also say that Anna had the best model skeleton to put Princess of Ofir on because she is the most princess-like as she is the Duchess. So... And Philavandrel has like his sword play. He's all, so there's that stuff. So I just, if they can add whatever, they can add anything. They can add anything. I'm a little excited, guys. I'm a little full of excitement. So let's talk about the first thing. The first major mechanic that's been added in the Merchants of Ofir is Stratagems. Now, Stratagems aren't really new because the stratagem that has always been in the game since Homecoming launched was Tactical Advantage. If you go first, you can boost an allied unit by 5. And we have known this to be the almighty fixer of the coin. Obviously, nothing's perfect, but going first has felt better since the addition of Tactical Advantage. I don't know who argues this. Really, really good addition, and it really makes going first or second much more interesting. You don't feel dreadful all the time when you're going first. But now, as you will see by my Shoop's Siege deck, which I will also throw a video out for, you have a new spot here, kind of like Thronebreaker. You get to switch out your artifact. So you switch out your stratagem. What I'm holding here is the Northern Realms exclusive stratagem, Engineering Solution, which does not boost an allied unit by 5. It boosts an allied unit by 3 and gives it a shield. It's a little different, right? It's just a little different. They added 12 new stratagems to the game, meaning that you have 13 to choose from at any given... Sorry, not really, because... 6 of them are faction. So it's like you always have 7 to choose from. So Tactical Advantage. And then we have the neutrals. Now, there was a dev stream that went through all these. They also went through all the scenarios. Scenarios are the other unique card that has been added for every faction. And they also played a couple of games. So there's some good stuff to watch out there. They came prepared for YouTube to drop an expansion. They actually have stuff to look at. So if you haven't had a chance to see what Austri and Powell were saying about the new cards, check it out. It was really cool for them to throw up a stream on the surprise expansion day. But I'm going to go quickly through these cards right here. So you have Basilisk Venom. This is poison a random enemy unit. It is not targeted, so there are lots of ways that this is going to not do well for you, but there's also a lot of new poison cards in the game and a lot of cards that care about your opponent having status effects. So you could choose to run this, and it also could just get you huge value. And remember, you're not always going to get these cards. These cards are only available to you on round 1 and only available to you if you're going first, with one exception. I'll talk about that exception much later. The Crystal Skull is a Purify, so if you're worried about a certain kind of deck coming at you with poisons, let's say, or other status effects, because status effects are going to be, they're going to be a little bit hotter than they normally are. So you can actually just kind of tech that Purify in so you don't get, wiped out by a poison on your opponent's red coin. You actually get a chance to fight back in that way. Just to give an example, the Enchanted Armor is a hand buff stratagem. No points on the board, points in the hand. Obviously very attractive to Scoia'tael, but boosting a unit in hand is honestly very good usually because you get to play a unit with an added boosted effect. So anything that draws removal immediately is harder to kill. This is any unit in your hand. Whoop, I'm just adjusting the music here. But you do lose tempo in the first round, so that's the trade-off. It's an interesting choice, for sure. This is all neutral, by the way. You have the Cursed Scroll, which is actually not giving you points at all, but allowing you to actually look at the top 3 cards of your deck and do a little switcheroo. Improves your hand, which is very important sometimes if you need to have a specific card in your hand to win on round 1 if you're going on blue. This allows you to have more chances to get that card. But there is another card that deals with stratagems, and I feel like this card is a little bit better just because it exists. Not so much that you would choose it, but you could choose this card. And then there's the Ceremonial Dagger, which is one that I like very much, but probably will end up being the hardest to play because your opponent will always play around it. But this is as if you have a unit on the board that has a ping, and that your opponent just will never ever be able to remove it. So on blue coin, it's like you have a super-powered, invisible, pointless ballista, and you also can play an engine to start the round or play a ping effect. So it allows you to have very superior control from a ping standpoint. And I think Northern Realms will really love this card. That's why I crafted it first, because I started with NR, not just because I wanted to, and I did want to, but also the chat wanted me to. NR won by a landslide. And then you have the Magic Lamp, which is basically... it turns into a 5-point unit, a 5-point vanilla unit. And that's good if you need a body on the board right away for a card like Svalblood Priest. Like they actually give this exact example in the dev stream, and also Gulo in the chat was on that for sure. So this is cool because you can always start the game with a body if you have something that needs units. So I think this was something that this probably is very attractive to Skellige for a couple of reasons, but also attractive to monsters because it means that you're going to have dominance, even though dominance was reverted, praise Monster Jesus, but also the fact that you have a 5-point unit immediately, and that means you can consume it right away. You have dominance right away, even if your opponent didn't go first because you went first because you have the Magic Lamp. I mean, these are some real brain breakers. There's some leaders that love these more than others, and there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching, and the tournaments are going to be nuts when you can choose this for blue coin and customize a blue coin deck. The stuff in tournaments is always going to be, there's always going to be something new about it, I think. And then we have the faction-specific stratagem. So this is Northern Realms is boost and give shield. The Mask of Ouroboros is Skellige's, which allows you to draw a card and discard a card. So Skellige likes that for all sorts of reasons. There's a couple of cards, and even Bran as well, that allows you to get some value on the discard. Also, you can discard your Kraken Nigulis, the Tursark Skirmisher. Urn of Shadows, Snake Hands. This is for the monsters. They can trigger a bronze allied unit's Death Wish ability, and before you say, hey, that's exactly the same as Death Shadow. Well, Death Shadow has been changed. Some abilities have been moved around. I'm going to cover a little bit of that too. The Anshade Saber is spawn a Scoia'tael Neophyte, so this brings you 2 elves, totaling 4 points in stats, 2 bodies, 2 elves. So you have a lot of stuff that cares about it. This triggers Harmony if you played a Harmony card first. 2 bodies in general is great. It gets you 2/5 of the way to Eilerin, and it's just very flavorful. You lose a point, but you usually have something that cares enough about elves that you get that point back in some way. The Collar for Nilfgaard locks an enemy and damages it by 3. Extra control for Nilfgaard, very flavorful. I feel like adding an extra lock on blue coin ain't bad. Doesn't seem outrageous. Again, all of these are expected to be giving you an advantage when you are disadvantaged in the first place. And I think that lock is a great way to get control and swing a game around. And then Tiger's Eye, this is a beautiful premium card. I don't have premiums of any of these. But this is Syndicate. Gain 4 coins, which we know translates usually to more than 5 points. So that's usually just really good, but having coins means that Horde decks just automatically are better on blue coin, which is great because I feel like Horde was underrepresented, and they have a lot of good cards with cool effects. I like the Horde mechanic. And that's it. Those are the stratagem. And I also want to talk about some of the changes that we've seen. So check the patch notes, check the link in the description. We're going to be talking about a lot of that stuff, but I'm just going to quickly go over the brunt of it is 4 provision point units that went up to 5. Nothing was really buffed. Nothing in the game was really buffed. I would say that almost all the changed cards that came that were already in the game were nerfed. So I don't see anything standing out to me right now. There were a lot of changes, and it's just a lot of stuff to process right away. So of course, I'm going to be doing some more closer looks at the other factions, but I wanted to get this bad boy out for you right now. So I feel like 4 isn't where I should be looking. It's actually 5 is where I should be looking. So like, for instance, what was the one that shocked me the most? Was it Brockfar Hunter? That one was weird. So here, here's the one that was changed. Drummond Warmonger no longer destroys artifacts. So they added a new cycle of very, very interesting artifact cards, and they also brought down artifact control. It is a controversial opinion, I think. So cards like Drummond Warmonger, cards like the Vids Sapper, these cards don't kill artifacts anymore. They're still a Bomb Heaver, and all the gold cards that destroy artifacts still do that. But factionally and bronze-wise, you have less options. And I think it's because they didn't want these new cards, which are called scenarios, to be completely overshadowed by bronze artifact removal. But these cards don't really feel OP yet, but they are susceptible to removal, and that is tough when you have to invest 12 to 14 points in provisions. But that's kind of beside what I was trying to talk about. What I was looking at were cards that were nerfed. In this situation, maybe it wasn't as many as I thought, or maybe the nerfs didn't go through the way I expected. Here's now even Elven Swordmaster, I think, could have been one of the cards that maybe my distance from the game. I took a couple weeks off. I'm pretty sure this was one of the cards. Now a 5-point card, 5 provisions. And I would swear that I read that there's Brockfar Hunter. So this one's a real head scratcher. This card was like the only card that Skellige had that came out of Portal, and now it doesn't anymore because it got nerfed. And it wasn't being played very much, and I don't really know what the worry was here. I don't think Skellige was in a state, especially discard Skellige, was in such a state where this, with any of the additions, would change anything, because I didn't see a lot of discard effects in the Skellige set, but the Skellige set, oh man, all the sets are so great. All the archetypes are really, really great. I love them all. There's at least one card in every faction that I am just, thank you for making this card and this cool effect. So anyway, without getting like too into it, there are some nerfs in this situation. Oh, the Nausicaa Sergeant was another big one. Nausicaa Sergeant. Some Portal got some big hits. Nilfgaard still has lots of great Portal targets, but Nausicaa Sergeant was just a little too good because, you know, he's proccing on everything and proccing twice a lot of the time. So those are some of the changes that you're going to see. But the last thing I want to talk about for this first video is the scenario cards. Let's talk about these scenario cards. These were all added in the new set. And there are 6 of them, 1 for each faction. So these are very similar. If you've ever played Magic the Gathering, these cards are very similar to Saga enchantments, in which they have 3 stages that they go through before they have completed the story that it's being told. So the story that's being told in Northern Realms is Siege. So when you play this card, the prologue is something that happens immediately. So when this card is played, 14 provisions. Nothing to scoff at, but I'll explain why I think the provision cost is okay. So you play Reinforced Trebuchet, and then when you play a Siege Engine, that's the progress. When you play a siege engine, you automatically spawn a battering ram, and when you play a second siege engine, you then spawn bombardment. So this card is interesting because you can look at this. You can look at the provisions, right? This is 15 points in provisions that you get for putting a 14-point card in your deck, but you also have cards that are triggering twice in it. Like you have the Reinforced Trebuchet is coming out, but then if you're playing Pincer Maneuver or something that is pulling or playing a siege engine, you are now playing 2 cards in a turn or perhaps 3 cards in a turn. There is value there. You're also spawning cards and creating new cards. So this means that if you're playing something like Mobilization, it's a lot easier to find to mulligan away those cards, so you can actually trigger the Mobilization. And that also, you're also creating a better board for future bombardments, for future warfare as well, and creating just a lot of attrition, which is what Siege is all about. So I think that I like this card for a couple reasons. One, it is a warfare-based, siege engine-based type card. That's what I really like about it, because I think that warfare and siege was a good direction. It's a good direction for Northern Realms because it's where control is, and I am a control player at heart. I do like Enslaved Nilfgaard. You can rage at me all you want, but I love the good control. I love good control. So this card has not felt overpowered, and I've even tried playing it with Caretaker. There's some cards that make it very reliable to draw and play and even replay this card in the neutral section, which I'll go in the next video. But I think that these cards have a lot of potential, but because they're such high provisions, it's kind of like you need to build your deck around it at the very, very low end. But the good news is these cards get great value from you, and what it's asking of you is to play smaller cards. So it's kind of like playing Portal to set up. It's priced in the same way, and it gives you value in a different way. 14 is pretty steep. It is one of the steepest ones, and I don't know why it needs to be, but I think it's probably because they put 3 5-provision cards into the whole recipe, and we'll see. I see these cards being, they might shift around here and there, but play rate will tell the story, and power level. I think Caretaker is a very interesting inclusion, though, and I'll show you why. What card? There's a card that always draws your highest provision card, so it's either your Scenario or the Caretaker to replay it. For Skellige, you have Gedinith, and I don't know how to pronounce this, but I'm just going to call it Gedinith. So this scenario progresses whenever you play a druid, and Skellige got a lot of druids. So this is probably more likely to be the card that you're going to play with the expansion set cards, whereas Northern Realms, you can play the expansion set or not, but Northern Realms got 2 archetypes, I would say. But in Gedinith, you play a druid, and you start to spawn some stuff. It's always about spawning. So on Prologue, you spawn the Crow Clan Preacher. Come back now. Which is a 4-strength card that cares about alchemy cards. And then you spawn the Crow's Eye Rhizo, which is an alchemy card that spawns units, crows in particular, and Skellige loves that. You'll find out soon. And then finally, it spawns a Mardro. So you have an alchemy-loving card. You've played 2 alchemy units. You're damaging it. You're boosting it. Lots of other Skellige cards that care about this. Also a very expensive stratagem. This one appears to be one of the weakest ones, but being able to play a number of alchemy cards in a row, double alchemy, you're playing a lot of these things twice. So that means that the Crow Clan Preacher, tongue twister right here, the Crow Clan Preacher is getting a lot of boosts right away. And because it's a bonded card and a relatively cheap card to include, and it also procs the actual scenario in the first place, you are likely going to get the bonded ability and play lots of special cards, raids, whatever. So these cards will actually get you a lot of value. It really does feel Portal-esque, but it doesn't feel better than Portal. It feels maybe a little worse than Portal because of its cost. But Portal's really good, and I think it just gives you a nice alternate play style if you want to play something like Portal but also play Artifact. That's what I like the most about it. Okay, so most of them are 14, actually. The Monsters one, very scary artwork. Probably some of the creepiest artwork in the game ever. This one progresses whenever you play Deathwish. Monsters got a lot of Deathwish support, and they have cool things with Specters and Consume. So for this one, when you play the Haunt, you spawn the Desert Banshee with the 4-strength unit that can consume on order. And it also boosts itself by 1. So what usually is happening, every scenario spawns an engine. the engine usually cares about the other things that happen in the next chapters. So you are playing, so you play a Death Wish unit, then you spawn the Barghest, which is a consume unit. It consumes twice as well. And then finally the Night Wraith, which is a Death Wish unit that also spawns a whole bunch of stuff. So it's very swarmy, it's very all over the place. It creates a lot of 1-strength units. There's a lot of rat stuff happening in monsters. So this is pretty cool. I do like it. The Masquerade Ball. This is probably the scariest one, because I know what a lot of poison means. It means nothing's living. So whenever you play an aristocrat, so this is a new tag that was added to Nilfgaard. They received a lot of aristocrats. However, they were also given the tag to a lot of units that already existed in Northern Realms, like Vatir, I think Vivian. So they're all now aristocrats. Aristocrats. So now you have the prologue spawns a Thirsty Dame, and the Thirsty Dame is a vampire and an aristocrat, which is Nilfgaard's really out there theme that they got in this expansion. And it, of course, is an engine. And then you're seeing a little bit of status Nilfgaard. So status effects, Nilfgaard loves causing status effects. They always have, but now they really like it. So now this is constantly boosting itself, and now you're spawning and playing Fangs of the Empire once and then twice. A lot of the time you're spawning poison, 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 because there's an aristocrat that also gives poison. So a lot of double poisons mean that if you're in a bleed roll, your opponent just won't be able to set up anything unless they're spending the big double play cards. Feign Death. This is only 12 points. GWENT gets a little bit of a bargain, I think, in their provisions, and they should, I think, because RIP Precision Strike being the mansion for your provision points. No longer does it have 18 provisions. So it's cool that GWENT gets a little bit of love in that their scenario, I think I'm just calling them stratagem by accident. Their scenario is 12 provision. Makes it easier for them to run this and something huge like Giant Oak. So in this case, this is probably one of the easiest ones to do because this cares about elves. All of GWENT in this expansion is all about those elves. Whenever you play an elf, you're spawning an Elven Deadeye on the road. Sorry. Whenever you play an elf, you're progressing the scenario. When you play the prologue, you spawn the Elven Deadeye. When you play another elf, you spawn 2 Elven Deadeyes. And when you play another elf, you spawn a Waylay, which damages the unit end by 3, and might actually spawn a 4th Elven Deadeye. There's a lot of cards that care about Elf Swarm, and Deadeyes in particular. The Elf Swarm package does seem quite good. Quite good, and this card may or may not be part of it. I don't think you need to run it, but it's an option. And then finally, Welcome to the Passiflora is the scenario for Syndicate, and this is whenever you play a unit with a fee. So you start off by creating Passiflora Peaches, which is a new unit for Syndicate, 4 strength, human, blind eye. It cares about Horde. At the end of your turn, boost self by 1. So again, it is a engine, or an engine, if I want to speak correct English. Whenever you play a unit with fee, you get to play a bunch of other stuff. So this is a really cool scenario because it plays crimes, and Syndicate has so many cards that cares about crimes. And you're double crime and eavesdrop, but you play a unit with a fee, which isn't playing crimes. But you get to play a lot of extra crimes without having a hand full of them. So playing a unit with a fee, and there are a lot of those, and a lot of them added in the expansion as well. Plus, you're profiting a lot, too. There's a lot of Horde cards that were added to the expansion as well. And the Horde seems to be like a very legitimate mechanic. Can it compete with the good stuff that Syndicate has? A lot of the stuff that was added to the game doesn't necessarily add tons of support for the really good stuff. I think Nilfgaard and Slave really didn't get a lot. If anything, they got nerfed because it's Nausicaa Sergeant. But I think that, if you see Horde really rising here, also 12 provisions, the cheaper scenario. So Syndicate and GWENT getting the bargains that I would say is fairly characteristic. Pretty cool stuff. So these are all the new, the brand new stuff that was added to the expansion as far as like very, very unique cards. But one more thing I want to cap off when we're talking about the stratagems, I did say that there was a card that you're only ever using a stratagem in round 1, and you're only ever using it if you go first. And that's why none of them should seem that outrageous, because it is something to help you when you have a disadvantage. But there is a card that allows you to create and play a stratagem. And it's a hell of a card because it's a Shoop card. It is a singleton card. If your starting deck has no dupes, you can either play your faction stratagem if you play Radia on the melee row, or you create a neutral one. And this is a situation where you might create Cursed Scroll to actually to get a card you're looking for in the last round. It might actually be a situation where you would really need to boost something in your hand. Also, for 10 provisions, this is a pretty powerful effect to have 8 strength on the body and create up to 5 uninteractable points. Very, very cool card added to the game. You don't necessarily need to play Shoop at all, but it's an interesting incentive. I don't know if it pushes Singleton, but I did have a lot of fun when playing Shoop Siege. Seemed like it was pretty good, just because of the power level, not for any specific outcome, but just it felt really good to have an uninteractable, like an absolutely untouchable, invisible, invincible artifact. Pretty cool, right? Check it out, Merchants of Ofir. We have a lot to talk about. Stick on the stream. We're going to be talking about neutral cards. We're going to go through all the factions, and we're going to do a quick review, and I'm going to make my picks for what I think is going to be the most impactful cards in the meta, which is going to be just out there. I've only played 3 games, so, you know, we're going to probably review these videos later. But for now, I'm going to cut this video here. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for sticking around. This has been my first YouTube video in a while, so if you haven't done that, like and subscribe and all that stuff, and I'll see you for the next video, which I'll release